Okay, we're talking about the old City Hall tonight. We give a quick background on the old City Hall. The City Hall was built in 1986. It's almost 3,000 square feet on a 1.5 acre site. As you know, we've moved into the new building. It's been leased, but it's currently vacant. And there's an old space needs study that was sent out with the packet that discusses all the issues that we have with the building. So last time we had some options. This time we kind of pared it down a little bit, looking at option one, demolish the building, expand parking, two, lease the building to a business. We could keep parking located in the back for City Hall and build a new parking lot in the front, keep the building and revisit it next year, or monitor the school site and partner with future developers on that site. So the space needs study was completed, and kind of big picture, the repairs are over 800,000. We could talk about that a little bit later, but there's a list of repairs. There's a lot of repairs. I mean, one of the AC condensers is from 1986. So you're looking at HVAC, electrical, siding, roof, almost everything to get this ready. And the yearly maintenance costs, we had this on the slide from last time, just kind of shows you what we're looking at, electric, gas, and insurance. Staff comments for option one. Just wanted to be clear, talking to administration, fire, finance, really like more parking, would prefer to see option one, demolish the building. We looked at the current City Hall, and the spaces required for zoning, it's 81, and the existing is 71, which includes the 12 at the old City Hall site. So options, we just have the pros and cons. This is from last time. We're demolishing the building, expanding parking. And then two, we're just kind of going through this. I think one of the things, the cons for two would be just some of the issues with the access for fire when businesses would access the site. And then revisiting the issue and monitor the school site. So monitoring the school site, just so everyone knows, the EDA requested that the council go to a workshop over the Fury site and take that to a September workshop. So that's something that we'll discuss in September also. So this is the option for the parking lot from HKGI. Gives us 40 parking spaces. It slopes near the school site, so this is pretty much maxed out parking on the site with connections and landscaping. And then the cost, you have about $35,000 for demolition. Could be more, but that's an estimate. In total, $291,000 to demo the site and install a parking lot. This would keep the parking lot in the back, but a parking lot in the front, and then repair the building. This is just for the exterior, not the exterior of the building. This is just the outside. So you're looking at landscape, hardscape. It's $217 to move forward. And then we looked at commercial value and leasing. So I want to introduce Scott Cragness from Metro East. He did a broker price opinion, has looked at the values and what we think we can see from the building. So we're looking at a building value is in your packet of about $473,000 to $555,000. One thing that I want to bring up with this is for new construction, is it $450 a square foot to build brand new? So you're seeing really high build cost right now.
Really high build cost, yes. Yep, so, and if you want, is this where you wanted me to jump in here, Jason?
A little bit, yeah, go ahead.
So, when taking a look at that building over there, it would be highly desirable if we were on the market right now, if you were trying to lease it and or sell it. For that matter, I think you'd find a lot of folks very interested in it, businesses and whatnot, just for that value. You know, you're coming in, it costs, by the time you acquire some land, an acre and a half is probably about $500,000. You're going to put $450 a square foot. It doesn't take you long to get to $2.5 million, right? So it's small in size. For some people, that's good. We are finding users in that 4,000 and under. Lots of interest in that type of product. 7,000. When you get into that realm, maybe not so much. So then you ask yourself, you know, if you wanted to sell or lease. Either way, you'd have some improvements to put in. A lot of tenants, I think, because of that 450, we could get them along for the ride a little bit to help add in with some of the tenant improvements, although, you know, some of the structural things and electrical things and mechanical things, the owners would handle themselves, right? But then you get somebody else paying to improve it. I think in any case, shape or form, you'd start at about, you know, I'd say easily it'd be more like 52 to 54,000 in net income. And what that would be is it'd be an easy building to have if you leased it, a triple net lease where you bring in a tenant, they have it, they pay all the bills. You would get reimbursed for tax and insurance, they'd handle their own utilities otherwise, and away they go. And they would have it 5 to 10 years. And early on, it wouldn't pay you much as far as income because you'd be putting $120,000 to $200,000 into it. However, over time, it's just going to grow and grow and grow. Your rents are going to increase by 2.5% to 3%, maybe even more in Lake Elmo. Highly desirable community, it's growing, things like that. And it'll just keep growing, and the building will keep appreciating. And if you look at it over a 30-year continuum, the building runs up to about $2 million. Rents will be at about $95,000, so all things being equal. At that point, you're in a much better position, although it takes a little while to get there. And that's no different than if you had an investor doing the same thing. In the first 10 to 15 years, you really don't make a lot of money, and you're hoping for the big shoe not to drop. But then it starts to become your annuity for a retirement is what we see a lot. But currently, if you decided to sell that land, which you have many uses, I don't know if that would be in there, or if you wanted to lease it for a while, I think it would be quite attractive to a lot of people. As improved and or as is, you're just gonna flex your price point based on what you're getting given, you know.
So one thing just at the bottom of this is looking at a tenant build out that we discussed of 150, but with the deferred maintenance, 500,000 minimum going into this. And one of our concerns is if we do hold on to it and lease it and not put a considerable amount of money into the building, we could have issues, you know, 2 years from now, and then we constantly are trying to fix the building. So it becomes a maintenance nightmare. So this is just operating income for the first year. So we're looking at rental income around 47,000, and this is kind of like the best case scenario. Gross 43. Once you get down to the expenses, we treated the debt service. You'll see net operating is a little bit above 39,000, but the debt service, basically what I took was half of the outside, which is like 220, 110, because some of it's going to go to the city hall. So it's basically 610 of debt service, treating it like debt service. I believe it was at a 6% rate or 5%, and it's amortized over 30 years. It gives you a yearly payment of about $39,000 for the next 30 years. So you can see the cash flow, your negative cash flow in year one. But
that cash flow doesn't include any maintenance costs for the building?
they would provide the maintenance, but we would have a reserve, which I think is low for this, but it's putting a 2,000, a little bit over 2,000 just reserve for the building per year. So, you know, we have some numbers that we probably want to address. So,
But they don't have any maintenance costs, just reserves.
the reserves are for large, that would all have to be negotiated. So like in this, they would maintain it through the term, right?
Okay.
But these are reserves for like large
Okay, so
issues. So
tenant would maintain.
I think we discussed like we could not have reserves and place all maintenance and repairs.
In a triple net scenario, and let's just say we get that tenant where they come in and they want to handle it, they would handle the maintenance. They do anything. If a window breaks, they fix it. They
Okay.
call their own contractors and they handle it.
Okay.
They would even pay the maintenance fee, so you would get that in there. But now again, therein lies how every investor or whoever owns a property, there's different ways they want to look at it. Do you want to retain that and say we have reserves, we're going to hold it over here? The accountants will kind of tell you maybe how best to allocate a lot of that the kind of the funds you collect for those types of expenses. Because in your invoice, you're going to have, here's your base rent, they're going to pay everything, you're going to say, I'm going to collect this much per month in a tax, and we're going to pay this much a month for common area expenses such as lawn, snow, those types of things, because the city will want to handle that and just kind of reimburse yourselves for that. So you're going to fill your pockets, and then if you want, however you move it from one to the other, I think, that's a way that the finance team would be able to help do that and handle the depreciation of the building then at that point too. After the improvements, I'm not sure how that would work, but I think you would be able to depreciate these improvements, how they handle it on a capitalized basis.
So this leasing structure is best case scenario through year 20, looking at a cash flow of net operating income of about 68,000 and cash flow right under 30,000. But that gets to year 20, and you're still amortizing through 30 in this scenario. So, yeah, that's how we kind of looked at that with the best case scenario.
So then after year 20, your debt service is paid off.
Year 30.
30.
Year 30.
Year 30.
Yeah. If you run this at 20 year, you're not going to cash flow for 20 years.
Right.
Yeah, in a 30-year type scenario, if that right there, though, that's at year 20, Jason. I looked at, so in a 30-year scenario, on some rough numbers that I plugged in, if you looked at it, I would look at the appreciation, if it trends like it has the last 30 years, the building value would go from 1.95 in this range, 1.9 to 2.2 million, depending on a few things. I think your rents would go up to right around $94,000 in annual gross rent at year 30 is where that would be. Your expenses are going to go up with that too, but you're going to push most of those off to the tenant in a perfect.
And I believe since it's a commercial property leasing, we would receive taxes at the normal rate for that. It's something we talked about. It is-
Yeah,
like
we
would-
wanna, we're different though because it's non-tax land. And so the county creates what's it called again?
I don't remember.
It creates a tax for the renter, the leaseholder. So
Okay.
we would want that that
On
they
them.
just pay them.
Okay.
Is that
Yeah.
similar to what we're paying on the agricultural land
Yeah,
that we're
yeah.
renting?
So, and that just we didn't know that, so it got weird. So I'd like to talk to Jason about it. If we do this, we want to make sure we structure the lease appropriately and have them pay that property tax. It
Right.
becomes, or not property tax, personal property.
Yeah.
It becomes a personal property tax set up under a completely separate PID. It's really
Okay.
weird.
All right.
That's the chart and the recommend, we're just looking for input too. I mean, last time we came, definitely had questions, financial questions, so.
Two questions. So the rental income increase there, was that based off of a 2% per year increase?
It's a 3%.
3%? And then I guess this is kind of going into maybe just like some thoughts and discussion is, if we would put this type of capital into improving this site, I don't think we would want to do that if we were also thinking about potentially having conversations with the school 5 years from now. And maybe you can speak to that too. I mean, like oftentimes when you buy a house, if you try to sell within the first 3 to 5 years, even if you make improvements, you come out under. You have to hold on to it for a
You would
certain
come out
period
under.
of time.
If you're
And
looking
so-
at, yeah, if that's in the 1 to 5 year plan, I would definitely sit back. You could try to lease it as is, don't put, get it so it works. If you turn the air on, it comes on, you turn the heat on, it comes on, you don't need to, I mean, it's not bad the way it is. I mean, we lease a lot, it's not in bad shape. You look at these studies.
You can say
People think
I agree.
It's dated, there's some parts of functional obsolescence about it, but it's not in horrible shape.
Yeah.
It doesn't leak, it doesn't stink, it's okay.
It works as an
And you
office
could
space
get
for
a
a lot
little
of people,
bit
but-
and just, maybe put a little bit in here and get someone in there short term, even on a year to year or a 3 year with give yourself some flexibility and figure this piece out.
But I guess
But
maybe
I wouldn't spend a bunch of money on it,
Yeah,
no.
but I guess my point is if we're gonna go this strategy, I think we have to be committed to it long-term. This can't be hey, we're thinking about, possibly working with whatever happens at the school, whatever happens at Fury. If we wanna potentially do that, then I think we need to just wait. I don't think we put money into this thing.
Can somebody talk me through what that might look like with Fury or the school district?
Yeah.
I can't visualize that working together.
Doesn't the community group have a purchase agreement on the elementary school? I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't think they do, I think they were talking, but I believe the community they do have the school site, I believe, locked up and in contract. I don't know that it's closed yet, but I do believe it's in contract. The Fury site, I believe, is still not in contract.
Right, I was just talking just the school site itself.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I could jump in here. I talked to the school today, and Brian Zeller. So we're going to meet with all the parties, so when we have the workshop, everyone's on the same page. What we're pitching to the council is that it really makes sense, only makes sense if we get the master plan component to it. So it'd be purchasing both sites and then master planning that site, and then having an area as an option for the Valley Community Center.
Okay.
And they would have an option to purchase, and then we would actively go find developers to purchase and develop the rest of it. That is what you're gonna hear at the workshop.
Did the district give an indication they still are pursuing the execution of their agreement? Because they've had closed sessions on it recently, and the agreement still has not been executed and closed, which
They have a purchase.
they have a purchase agreement, but it has not closed.
Right.
Right. We're meeting with VCC next week, I believe, so we can get an update from VCC.
So after reading that building report, with bathrooms aren't code conforming, they're not handicap accessible, as I recall.
Correct.
And there's some other things. Could we actually lease that building out with the code violations that currently exist? It's been vacant for a while.
Yeah.
And so depending on the length of vacancy, if it's vacant for more than, I think, a year, it sits in my mind, you have to bring it up to code.
Okay, so here's what, and I'm not sure, it varies a little bit. In some municipalities, it can be grandfathered in. I lease a lot of old buildings downtown Stillwater. Those are grandfathered in based on occupancy loads. They say you're gonna be okay with these. If it's retail, it's a different story. If it's office, this is not a retail building,
Yeah, okay.
so I think you'd be fine. But let's just say some fitness center or dance company wanted to come in, it probably wouldn't be a good fit, although they may want to because of that reason. If you start changing that use, although right now, you could zone it however you want to. I think right now it's kind of, the last thing it was automotive for that. The county right now is looking at it as something like that. So as long as it's kind of a low density office type situation, I think it should be grandfathered in, but I can't say that with
So
certainty.
we can get back to you on this too, like if you do, that's the challenge with
Yeah.
renovating, once you start renovating, you'd have to bring it up to code.
Then you
Bring it
have
up
to
to
bring it up
code,
to
yeah.
code. Yep.
The other thing that was in there was, you talked a lot about the outdoor siding being in bad condition, rotted in areas and that. Is there something we have to do there to protect the structural integrity of the building? Given we have cedar siding that's rotted?
You can just take a look at, they'll look at it, you can take the siding off, oftentimes the underlayment's still there.
Yeah.
And the structure's probably fine.
But we'd have to do something with the rotted
You'd have to do
siding.
something, you'd replace it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did some of that stuff right up there at the well. I think the siding ended up being in much better shape than they originally thought, so they used a lot of it and replaced some of the rotted boards, which I think need to stick out, but that's pretty common too. Very common in most of these buildings, yeah.
One of the underlying variables here was the need for 11 additional parking spots. I guess the question I have, we have no parking on Laverne.
Momentarily.
And
Temporarily.
so that was my question, like, are we able to, I guess the question would be for Chief. I was under the impression that we added those no parking to help the turns of the engines. Is my memory terrible?
No, I think when we got onto the site, I believe Laverne was already no parking.
I think so.
This
yeah.
was right around the time when I first got here, so I think Laverne was already no parking, but we made sure that at least there's, now that the school's out of there, I'd advocate to have Laverne at least partial parking on one side, but to try to keep our corners free so we have that truck movement in and out.
Could we,
We would need that.
could we like paint 10 or 11 specific spots that conform and will not be a problem for you, but to say, here are 10 additional spots?
Like there on Lake Elmo Avenue?
Yes, where, fits a minivan or a pickup truck, therefore it might fit everything else. Now, here's those 10. I mean, I have other thoughts with the building itself, but to me, if it works for public safety, for our fire trucks, I think that is a very good pay for the paint.
You're talking on Laverne?
On the east, probably on the east, west, I don't know which side would work better for turning.
It's something I'd have to work with engineering and public works on to see what side makes the most sense. I think the west side does.
We counted about 12 spaces.
In terms of like the site itself, I have no interest in trying to go 20 years out to have a net cash flow of 29,000 when there's always gonna be other variables that we can't control for during the next 2 decades. I don't see a substantial value gain there. I am fine if there's someone who wants to lease it for yearly or for a 3-year thing. But I think the thing that we don't know is what's gonna happen with Fury. We don't know what's gonna happen with the school district site, because they have not closed on it. So that's why I could see like a 1 to 3 year, and if something happens where it's a group effort, then it does. But I would at least want to hold open that option to see, because things take time. It might take 2 or 4 years for something to happen with Zeller, with the district. But I would not want to enter into a long-term contract that prevents us from having an 1.5-acre site that's a part of it.
If we were gonna do even a 3-year lease, would we still need to do the improvements, though? Some of the improvements that we talked about?
Some of the HVAC, electrical.
Yeah.
That basic stuff.
Yeah, to dovetail on what Jason said, you wouldn't want to do any remodeling, but you could do some, replacing stuff. You could have an HVAC work done, things like that.
And then if the tenant with the triple net
They
lease
could come
wanted
in
to
and-
do stuff, they could do stuff.
Yep, and then if they need to bring the bathrooms up to code, then that's on them.
Or they can
For
just
their
leave them
use.
as is.
Or they could leave them as is, as
be
long as
okay.
their use works and they're not improving it to the point that it's going to require that. But if you have to pull a permit, get an inspection, I think they're gonna say, all right, EDA, here you go.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's important to remember is if you go that route, it's not free because the parking lot is gonna be around $220.
Yeah.
True,
Yeah.
you need to
So
put a
just-
parking lot.
So all those, the numbers that you initially drew up on the presentation are still, we would have those expenses.
Some of them.
So if you did the 20-year, my estimation is like, yeah, it would be 610 because you would cut that parking lot like value in half, but it's really 220. So you would end up spending 220 plus 500 in 20 years, and then if you go this route, you would just spend 220.
I look at it and say, do we really want to be in the real estate business for $5,000 a year of income? I mean, if we think the space could be used for office or someone could lease it, we should sell it. And if we want to hang on to it, probably just demolish it and leave the site vacant till you determine what's happening with the other sites and then decide what you want to do. But I don't see that we get a lot by renting something out. We get $5,000 of income over a year for the first 5 years. Just seems like a lot of anguish. In one of my previous positions, we had a 77,000 square foot office building. We ended up inheriting basically and running. And I can tell you, it's no fun. Tennis can be great and tennis can be really difficult. But, they call you at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's alarm going off or whatever it is. And for $5,000 a year, I just don't think it's worth it.
So, given that we don't really know what's Fury and the school district site, because the school district site basically owns that field and property between Fury and the old office building, what would people think if we demoed that building, seeing that I'm hearing people not wanting to get into real estate, which is a valid point, but not put in the full parking lot, not knowing what's going on,
Right.
but create some, gravel type surface for some additional parking. And then when we know what's going on with the adjacent sites, if this plays into it or not, then we can, so I have kind of a middle of the road thing until things get firmer to the south and the west.
Did I read right? Demo was like 35,000?
That's the projection. It could be a little bit more though.
Could be.
And as part of that, can it literally be like putting down class 5 over the demo part? Not,
Then dig it out, right, and then you just gotta grade it and then put some class 5.
because again, it's not a permanent parking lot. Might be, probably might not be. So yeah, I'm fine with that.
Might be the smartest thing you've said all year, Mayor.
Really?
Might be.
Way.
Might be.
Is that, Jason, is that allowed in our charters though? We tried to do that in another city and we couldn't because we'd be violating our own standards.
I mean, it would be temporary, so.
We'd grant
It's like
ourselves a
overflow.
variance.
That was like, right.
Another thing that we should keep in mind is that that old city hall is used for community use. So according to Julie, there were 24 reservations last year plus 26 additional reservations for the ski patrol last year. And so it'll probably impact the
What ski patrol is doing, like, they were doing.
Training.
Training,
Yep,
teaching?
yep. So we'll probably see, without that building, I would assume that we would see an increase in requests to use this room,
Mhm.
which we balance with staff's availability to use it too.
Yeah,
So we might have to, at some point, revisit the room use policy too.
yeah. Let's see how it works out. I'm not saying it's a perfect situation, but just trying to make sure we don't shortcut ourselves from an opportunity that could happen. I'm in agreement. I don't know that we want to be putting money into a building for, you know, for a budget that's in the 9 million and probably growing, that's really worth, sad to say, worth the time or effort to do that. So, I don't know, that's my thought.
I mean, another maybe short-term gap alternative would be to offer to lease it out for a 3-year term while the school and the Fury lot trying to figure out what they're going to do. If that would, we're not gonna make a lot of money, but we could, minimize our out-of-pocket while we see what's happening.
Well, we'll minimize out of pocket and just demo it for like.
I agree. I'm listening though to the other things, saying, well, maybe, keep it for a couple of years and then see what happens, and
Somebody's gonna have to call Steve DeLapp though and let him know if it does get demolished. It's not gonna be me.
2/3 of this room does not understand what you said.
3/4.
Yeah, probably 3, all but maybe you and me. I don't know.
I'm okay with just a demo too.
Matt?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think keeping as much flexibility as possible while Fury and the school figure out their thing.
Okay.
I think that's most important.
Does that kind of get to your point of not doing anything permanent till we
Yeah,
figure
and
out
I'm
what's going on?
fully in agreement of government shouldn't be in the business of running a business.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Things you do well and things you let the professionals do well. All right, cool. Is that enough to go on there, sir? Great. So, thank you very much for your time,
Yeah,
appreciate
Thank
it.
you for having me.
Yep. Next on the agenda, we have evaluation of request-based parking restrictions.
Oh, speaking of parking,
All right, Mayor and council members, recently cities received several requests from residents asking to either install new parking restrictions or remove existing no parking signs. While cities establish a parking design standard based on street width and classification, those standards are primarily applied during construction of new streets or when streets are fully reconstructed as part of the capital improvement program. Currently, the city does not have a formal process for evaluating residents' requests on existing roadways. In many cases, existing parking restrictions were installed years ago for reasons that are not always documented. They may have been related to traffic operations, emergency vehicle access, site distances, concerns, or nearby amenities such as parks or lake accesses. As a result, it can be difficult for staff to consistently evaluate new requests. To address this, staff is proposing development of a formal administrative review process. Under this framework, the Public Works Director would evaluate requests using the city's current parking standard along with professional engineering judgment. For requests involving a limited area, such as a single intersection or location with documented site distance concerns, staff would review the request and make a determination administratively. For requests that affect a larger area, such as entire block or neighborhood streets, where staff determines the request has merit, the proposal would require a petition from affected property owners and a public hearing before the city council prior to any changes being made. This process would provide a consistent, fair, transparent method for evaluating future parking requests while ensuring that larger neighborhood impacts receive public input and council consideration. Tonight, we're seeking feedback from council on this proposed framework.
So is that, from what I heard, what I think I heard, would primarily occur just during when things are being constructed?
So, first one came through was on Lake Jane. And that one, there's construction going on right now, but I think there's other underlying issues there that the homeowner was requesting. Smaller, big lot, or I should say big house, small lot, no parking in the driveway.
Got it.
So, that was that particular one. The other one is, in my opinion, is from construction. A lot of construction vehicles, because when you get into where the particular areas, there's contractors parking on both sides of the road.
Right.
Which make it difficult for
Right.
passing. The areas of the neighborhood or the development where I've driven through, you don't have the cars parked along the road like you do in the other areas.
Okay.
And right now, these requests are coming by phone, by email, word of mouth, saying, city, we need you to either add parking restrictions in case of the construction, where there be park on both sides, or we don't like the rule that was there since 1992, but we don't know why the rule was put in place in 1992. And it may or may not conform with our current standards.
So yes, coming through email, most of them through, I should say all of them been through email. Particularly like the one on Lake Jane, nobody can find any documentation or anything like that. We're just assuming that particular, because the location of the boat launch, that nobody wanted all the boat trailers and trucks and everything parked inside both sides of the road.
You assumed correct.
No, that's for there, but the other areas have just been, yeah, everything's in email.
I personally like the proposal. I think it makes sense, and I would support it.
I like the idea of if there is a concern, and that concern could be addressed by current code, I think it's very reasonable. I just want to have some sort of fail-safe for maybe other residents around that area if for some reason they have the differing opinion. And so I guess just to really understand like what that administrative process would be, does that include reaching out to properties that are adjacent?
That included a petition from the neighboring properties, right?
Yes.
Is that just for the long stretch areas
That'd be for the,
versus?
that'd be for the streets affected, for the residents that'd be on that particular road.
So if the request affects a small area such as a problematic sightline, or review by staff should be sufficient to make a recommendation for posting a restriction. So that would just be no petition needed.
That is correct.
And that would be brought up by staff finding that issue, or because somebody emailed in that issue?
It'd be a request from a resident, then staff would go out and see if there is a sightline, for example, issue. or
Got it. And so there would be
something
no
else.
question about grandfathered because of previous variances. When that decision was made, it would happen.
Yep. It'd be up to staff.
Understanding if the resident was unhappy, if the resident was happy with the staff's decision, they can always come to the council meeting and voice their opinion.
Yeah.
Nothing prevents that from happening.
I'm just trying to think of the situations where I know like we've done that, right? Where we've said, hey, we're not gonna put a no parking location here, even though it was recommended in the presentation. And for some reason, during that discussion, that maybe was or wasn't recorded why we made that decision, it was made. And so I'm just trying to think, because I like it, but I just want to have some sort of protection there of, well, if council made this decision for a reason.
I don't recall us not agreeing to the no parking in the area. I think it was the amount of signage that was in the fields of St. Croix, where they got those one-way loops. And like the plan had signs at the beginning and the middle and the end and the end, and there was just a lot of signs, and I think we limited the number of no parking signs, and kind of the same thing with cul-de-sacs say, no parking starts here, no park, we don't need 8 signs in the cul-de-sac. I don't remember us going against the, I could be wrong.
Didn't we in Tana Ridge for the cul-de-sac? Say yes.
Well, we stopped parking, we took parking to a certain, where the chief said that our vehicles need to get to here without
Yes.
vehicles, and then from there, it was allowed.
So this would just be more for correcting errors that were maybe made in the past, not even errors, just we didn't have these policies in place,
Probably.
and so it just never was even put to council that there should be no parking here.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Chief,
No,
you grab the
No, I
microphone.
was just thinking when we've gone through Fields and Tanner Ridge and some of these other ones, a lot of it too had to do with Washington County and their just enforcement actions.
Yeah, right.
They didn't have the proper signage, they couldn't enforce
Right.
no parking because of the types of signage there, so. I think us as staff, we're just looking for a formal process so we can address everyone's concerns.
Yeah.
I like the one that's
Consistent.
presented.
Yeah.
I mean,
I do
from,
too.
from a process standpoint, I guess I would be curious in your thoughts, just to maybe objectify a bit more what constitutes a longer stretch.
Yeah.
X number of houses or X number of feet, whichever one is met. And again, is it 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 5,000 feet? I can't speak to that because you guys are the ones going out and observing and hearing what the complaints are. Or where that threshold should be, where it becomes something where it goes through a petition with a public hearing.
I think even coming up with that, though, is a fairly subjective criteria.
Correct, but I would rather have it identified than to simply, because then we can tell residents, look, this is the threshold. And I think that's at least, I can say
It has
that.
to be longer than the 90 feet in front of your house.
Yeah. And again, I don't know if I necessarily care tonight what that is, but I would be interested in hypotheticals, a quarter mile or 5 houses, whichever one it hits.
Maybe we make it a certain number of parking spaces. Well, they're all 20 feet, right? So if you want 100 feet, you have 5 parking spaces, but beyond 5 parking spaces or 10, or some number of parking
Yeah.
spaces that are being requested.
Well, because there's gonna be a time, right? There's gonna be a replacement for you at some point. You're gonna retire. And someone else may have a different perspective or view as to where that threshold should be. And I, as a resident, would want it to be consistent from Pete 1 to Pete 2. And I think that's fair.
Because you don't want to repeat.
Oh, dear God.
That's probably your best joke all year.
Yeah, that's the smartest thing you said all year.
Does council have any concerns about if a request were to come through for adding no parking and the neighbors in the said length are all okay with it, how that might impact a street over if they don't have that no parking, like now everyone goes and parks there?
Well, I hear that. I guess what I was thinking when was a gentleman that came from the Royal area and cars parking on both sides construction-wise. Mine's kind of locked on that. They just can't park further from the house they're working on as opposed to both sides. We don't have a lot of grid network streets in the city. Few. With the horseshoes. Everything's really curvilinear. It's really a geography of nowhere, if you will. But, I digress. I guess I don't see that. It could happen like 32nd if it's down near the lake or in the old village area. But I think those are already pretty well established. And again, something could pop up that would totally destroy that theory.
I mean, they go over the next street over and park, it's a public street.
Yeah.
Parking's
Yeah.
allowed. I mean,
If it's allowed, go for it.
Yeah.
Whereas this, we're talking about issues where it's a public safety issue for
Yes.
parking to occur when it shouldn't.
Yeah, they can't
Yes.
just petition to have no parking because they don't want people parking.
Correct.
There has to be a concern.
Yes.
So then, after, let's say, that construction is completed and the regular no parking, so are we gonna, would then, I'm imagining in your professional judgment, would put it at where it's expected to be no parking after construction is done, right? You following what I'm saying?
No, I'm not following you. 'Cause-
So let's say the city say, hey, we want no parking here, construction's done. Okay, no parking was kind of temporary during the construction portion. Does the no parking stay in place? Or does it get pulled, or how does that
I'll
work?
kind of jump in here, Mr. Mayor. The parking we're talking about is not temporary.
Okay.
It's permanent.
All
So
right.
it goes in, it's an enforceable sign.
Okay.
You can get a ticket. Yep.
All right, fair enough, thank you.
Just so I'm clear, what we're saying though is that anyone can do a request for a long stretch of a neighborhood road for, say, no parking, and then this process shows that there will be a petition and a public hearing, but it doesn't have to be related, I mean, they don't have to cite their reason, right? They could just not want parking in front of their house, and they could bring that? Is that,
No. Well, if
I
that's,
think we'd want a reason.
Yeah,
but
It
is
needs
that
to-
a reason? Is
well, I
that
have a
enough
neighbor
reason?
that doesn't like people parking in front of her house,
Yeah.
in front of their house. And it's been explained multiple times, it's a public street. At the time, there wasn't a no parking sign, now there is no parking there. So, I was like, but, did that work for removing no parking as well? So it's both ways?
I
Yeah.
personally would need it to be, it's a public safety reason why this change needs to occur.
Yeah,
That's the only, because otherwise it's a public street.
you leave it up to the professional judgment?
Yes.
Yep. Yep, I think that's what he's stating.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's the way I read it anyway. I think it makes sense, it expedites the process, and if it's a sightline issue or a public safety issue, I don't know that we need to decide that no parking's right, that's what we,
Well,
and
and
as intellectuals for.
a sight line being a type of public safety issue.
Yep.
did that answer your question?
Yeah, I can work with staff on it.
Okay.
But I was looking at it as two separate things. Like if there's a sightline issue, then staff can make a recommendation
Yeah.
based on their
Yep.
judgment. But we do have a process for people that, this would have a process for folks that just want to come in and cite their own reasons for why they want to
Sure.
request either no parking be added or no parking be removed.
And then that would be a petition amongst the
Yes.
residents in that
Yes.
area,
Yeah.
right? Okay. We good?
I believe so.
All right, let's move on to item 4. Draft capital improvement program and strategic financial planning related to CIP. Director Hadler.
All right. I'm loving the Windows P action, Nick, thank you for
Right?
that. I'm gonna
Good
pass
hockey.
this around. Okay, so we're talking about the draft of the CIP, as well as some of the strategic financial planning, mostly related to the CIP. And then at the end, we're actually gonna throw in some discussion about the stormwater funding for streets, which is related to kind of both of these issues. I'm passing around the list of items just for 2027, because that's when it kind of the pressing, one of the more pressing questions is, do we want to change anything in the CIP here in the next few months? We don't adopt this until December, so we've certainly got time for additional discussions. I'm going to keep these discussions fairly high level, so feel free to interject with any questions if there's anything that you want to dive in deeper. Oh, first and foremost, hold on. You hopefully noticed in your packet that the CIP is now a website. And hopefully you were able to peruse through that site before the meeting. So we have it broken down very similarly to the PDF version of the CIP. So we've got admin, finance, building inspections, fire, and then public works. And public works is broken down into various segments from there. So back to our presentation. Again, high level, where's my, we have a total of 156 projects totaling just over $137 million. This, again, is a 10-year CIP, so that's over 10 years. We obviously have one very large project in our CIP, being the water treatment plant. So I like to show what the CIP looks like without that. So that's 155 projects totaling just over, or about $87.5 million. Admin, finance, building, city hall, we kind of combined all of these because there's not a ton of things. And again, I'm trying to keep it high level. So we have a total of 8 projects totaling $410,000. The only purchase in 27-28 is 1 vehicle replacement in the building department. I'll mention right now the city center, building committee, we are building out that CIP. Obviously, it's a very new building, so the number of items will increase in the CIP as we move forward and are able to build that out. Fire typically is vehicle and equipment. So they have 10 projects totaling just over $3 million in the next 10 years, 10 years, and their major expenditures for 27 and 28 are the ladder replacement and the turnout gear. And I believe you were talking more about the ladder in August.
Yeah, so my intent is to come back in a future council meeting with kind of where we're at with the ladder 1 project. Now that we've had our, about 8 months of our ladder truck committee to really talk with 3 manufacturers, get some current specs and current pricing and see where we're at with that project. So I definitely be coming to you sooner rather than later to hopefully get your approval on where we're at with this project. Where we stand now in ladder 1, last year at this time, we talked about a project price of $2.2 million. Right now, we're around 1.925. And that's given 3 truck manufacturers in our truck committee a lot of time to kind of dive into the truck. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now. And that's the number we're using for that. This
version, right. So while the ladder 1 CIP date is in 2028 and 9, he'll be coming to you for approval actually this year. So just a heads up on that.
That gets us in line for a 29 delivery. Do you want me to talk about how we broke out?
Nope. We're gonna move on. Lots to talk about. Okay, and that brings us to Public Works. So as you know, Public Works is really the combination of 5 departments. So we've got streets / general public works, parks, water, sewer, and stormwater. So when we refer to Public Works, it's kind of one of all of those. For the CIP purposes, if we break out, we remove admin and finance, the building department, city hall, and the fire department, 96% of CIP dollars is in Public Works, one of those 5 departments. And that is even without the $50 million in the water treatment plant. So for the CIP breakdown, this is the same as I had done it last year. So we look at Public Works vehicles and equipment, Public Works buildings, and I call it like facilities, so it's like the areas around those buildings. And that is only the buildings that are not associated with utilities. So if it's a utility structure like a, somebody give me an example.
Lift station.
The well house, or something that's a building related to utilities, that's in the utility department. Parks, kind of similar. If it's a park pavilion, that's in the parks. And then we have infrastructure. Infrastructure is divided out into streets, water, sewer, and stormwater. So for the total CIP, we're looking at almost 134 million. And then for 27 and 28, close to 22 million. quick check-in just regarding CIP projects themselves or the CIP overall before I get into the funding and the strategic planning.
Well, I'll give my feedback right away. It's consistent with how it's been in the previous years, and I've struggled with this every time we come to the budget and the CIP, and I've kind of tried to go at it different directions as far as talking about line items when we get to the actual budget. Clearly, that was not a good approach. Last year, I looked more at, directing that focus more to the CIP, and I think I'd still like to continue going more that direction. I feel like what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, these are all the projects, and then let's raise a levy based off of that. I'd like to take a step back, kind of like what we did with what you're presenting later here with the stormwater, where there's a percentage where you say, hey, we're trying to catch up. We're gonna look for this 8% increase over the year, where the CIP is growing at a significantly higher than 8% per year rate. So my approach this year for staff, or my hope would be that we could ask to have more of like a decision around, well, what are we as a council okay with accepting as that increase from year to year? And then staff has to figure out what that is. I don't want to get in the business of looking through this line item by line item. I know that's been asked of us, but every time that is asked of us and then we give feedback, there's just pushback on it of why each individual item is needed. So I understand that. I think we got to find a way to balance how much increase we want each year in spending. Is that amount that we're currently doing reasonable or unreasonable? I think it's unreasonable. I think we need to bring it down. And so my feedback would be this needs to come lower. My honest opinion would be is that we aim for inflation rate, maybe plus 1 or 2% is kind of the annual increase that we're looking for how much we're spending in our CIP, and then staff has to figure out how to make that work. If there is something for some reason that's not going to work, kind of like the discussion we've had in previous meetings, is like, okay, well then bring that to us, show us why it is absolutely necessary that we go above that amount this year. Show us, like Chief with the fire truck. That was a perfect example of, it was brought to us, and yes, we did go and spend that money early, but there was a very specific reason for it. So I'm not saying we never can go over it, but I think we need to have a cap, because otherwise the spending is getting out of control. And so I guess that would be my feedback, is the number needs to come down. If you want me to put a number of how much I want to see it come down by, I'd say, hey, whatever we spent in 2025 or 2026, we can go up by whatever the inflation was over the last year, maybe plus 1 or 2% just to compromise, if you want me to put a number on it. But I don't want to look at any of these individual line items and say, this is the one I don't want. We'll set the policy on how much can be spent. And then with that amount of money, that capital that's available to be spent, staff can figure out how to spend it.
If I could just provide just a little bit of feedback on that particular topic, and I would love that in an ideal world. The struggle, and part of the reason that we really are trying to look at this strategically, is that capital expenditures typically are not in a smooth incline across time. We would expect actually that they go like this, which is why we're segregating these all out into different funds. It used to be that so much of the capital stuff was paid out of the general fund, which meant our general fund expenditures were going like this. And so what we're trying to get is our operations. We know that in a growing community, our operations are going to increase. So our strategy is really to try and keep that increase as even, an even trajectory, and not jumping all around, and recognizing that capital purchases, by virtue of being capital purchases, are going to kind of ping pong up and down over time, depending on the year. And so we can talk about how we want our, maybe not the expenditures, but the revenue side of that, so the tax levy, to be increasing at a slight pace, and that's definitely the goal. So that comes back to that strategy. that we'll be talking about. We're trying to get to a point, and it's going to be a few years, to figure out what that levy looks like so that it's kind of I'm calling it the leveling out point, where we're getting the capital levies to the point where we sort of, there's this predictable revenue stream over time, and we get to the point where we can hold that steady over the long term, so that, again, we're not having to jack up these levies over time. I'm gonna skip ahead.
Well, and, I mean, because I didn't
no,
want
I
to
don't
jump to that,
miss
because I know
that.
we're talking about that, but I mean, that is my feedback as well, and we've had this conversation before, it's been all presented. You did great work with showing us originally, you know, based off of kind of the numbers that you were originally saying that you wanted to put in those funds each year and how much we wanted to grow, how quickly we could get to, you know, our debt goal. I asked you, hey, well, what if we decrease that a little bit? You ran those reports for us. And again, I mean, I guess it is, it's a policy decision, but I thought those numbers, when we decreased how much we were increasing each year of those levies, I thought it was still moving us in a very responsible direction at a very reasonable rate. Yes, not quite as quickly as if we increased to the amount that you had originally proposed.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good balance of moving us in the right direction without also having the 20% tax increase that we were originally looking at
Right.
last year. You know, we were able to bring that down a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess
So
I'm going to
that's
keep on
the
pushing.
revenue side of it, yeah. So just to
And-
clarify the difference between the revenue side of it and the expense side, so.
Yeah.
I think on the expenditure side, you know, we look at the capital expenditures, it kind of fall into a couple of different places. One is, we have to do it because it's failing. You know, we have a sewer line, a water line, I don't know, a building roof, you know, they either have failed or are on the verge of failing, and we need to do it because we don't have a whole lot of choice. The other ones are, you know, the street maintenance program, we do it because if we spend $1,000 today, we don't have to spend $5,000 6 years from now. So they're smart decisions. You get more into the fuzzy stuff, so pick on public works, we want to buy a new dump truck, okay? So if we need to cut our spending, can we make that dump truck go one more year? You know, I mean, I think that's kind of the logic you have to apply to it. If the dump truck is really, you know, the wheels are falling off, and we're putting more money in to maintain it, you know, then that makes sense. And I think that's what our staff to, is make those evaluations for us and come back and say, we look at these line items, these are things we think we actually need. We could say, well, we don't care whether you need it or not, we're only gonna give you $3 million, do the best you can with it, but that may actually mean we spend more money than we would otherwise spend. So I think our goal to the staff should be, when you look at these expenditures, are they really absolutely necessary in this year based on those factors? And if they tell us they are, I think they've done a good job and made good decisions for us. We could still say, nah, you only get $3 million, but that's never good management in my book.
So are
Just
they,
get this to talk.
are the equipment,
Turn it off.
yeah, I had it off because I was coughing. Just quick question, the equipment expenditures that are in this currently are on the schedule for fleet redo? There's nothing new added that's not on the recycle?
There are a couple new items. Skid loader and a bucket truck. The other items are in the forestry mulcher is new also.
So
The other
those
piece of
items
equipment
total
are-
up to like $530,000. So that's a lot different than what we had in our fleet. So there should be some discussion about why those items are needed and why you think they need to be in this year. Moving forward would be my suggestion. Are there things that we have to do, like, what is the street light replacements? Are those ones that we own that aren't Excel, or what's the scoop on those? It's $100,000 kicker.
Watch us all. I think that's one of those issues we need to revisit. So we had planned them based on their sort of expiration date, Do you recall what that program is called with Excel? So when a community, a neighborhood is developed, Excel, or they install
Yeah,
the lights,
yeah.
and then they last for so long.
Yeah.
And so there's a decision
There's like a
point.
lease period, right?
Right, so there's this decision point that needs to happen. Are we gonna replace and go on the Excel program? Are we gonna buy them and own them ourselves? So I would say that is a placeholder at this point,
So
and
we
there are
haven't had
decisions
that
to be made.
conversation yet, correct?
Correct.
The
We s-
conversation we had last year, we asked council if you were interested in us exploring a separate streetlight fee to
Yeah.
help fund these, and the answer was no. And so,
Okay.
and we started planning for these, so.
And then is that UP, there's one house that crosses the UP at Upper 33rd. Is there, have we figured out an alternative, do they access the cul-de-sac then in Easton Village to get out? Is
So,
that-
yeah, this project is for that access closure.
Yeah.
This amount in here actually is for preliminary engineering. This is very new.
Yeah,
This is for some preliminary engineering to pursue a grant. So, the 80,000 is to do that work. And then I've got it on my spreadsheet here. I don't think you guys are seeing it right now, but there's an estimate, and this is just a very rough estimate of $500,000 to do the work, and a large part of that's gonna be property acquisition.
okay,
But that 500,000 is intended to be, we're intending to pursue a grant that would cover 80% of that cost.
okay.
So all the 500 is the,
That's some rail safety program.
yep, it is. It's a state grant. So the 80 grand is proposed now because it takes typically at least 2 or 3 cycles to be successful
Right.
with that grant program.
Why are we pursuing it to begin
It
with?
was an agreement
It was-
to have the act grade for Parkway, you needed to close one.
I thought we had already closed one elsewhere.
No.
No, this
And
is
that's the one we
because we were
picked?
allowed to build that,
It's just one
the
house,
crossing
right?
recently.
No,
That kind of is currently stubbed.
that is the access point for 300 houses into downtown for pedestrians and bikers.
Well, it just won't be a graded access, Jeff.
Is that the plan? Or is the plan to close the access?
Well, the plan would, you have to remove the access so a vehicle can't cross it.
It's a vehicle, not a vehicle crossing.
No, cars can't, we have boulders there to prevent that.
Yeah. But
But-
again, we're 3 years out.
Correct, but again, we're saying that this is first I've heard this. The two neighborhoods, Easton and Pulte, Northport, that's how they get to downtown for events, to go get coffee, to go get their back cracked, like that's where they go. But to confirm, they would still be able to, it's just making sure that cars can never use it.
Yeah, I mean, it's technically illegal to cross the train tracks on foot. You know, you're not supposed to be in the right of way, but I don't think the police are gonna be standing there, you know.
Yeah, because we're not eliminating the dirt road on the north side that goes all the way east from downtown. It goes from the warehouses, because the sewer line is there that provides sewer to the 33
No
acres.
need to, yeah.
So the dirt road's still there.
If there's access through it, for maintenance purposes, that would remain.
So if you got rid of that uncontrolled section for the railroad, would that allow the trains to not blow their horn at 2 in.the morning through
No,
downtown?
they gotta blow it because of Manning
They still have
and
to,
Lake
yeah.
Elmo Avenue.
But it's controlled? I thought.
But it's not a quiet zone. That's a different.
Okay, I thought it was only, they were only blowing it because of that uncontrolled section right
No.
there. Got it, okay.
And Manning will never be a quiet zone,
Yeah.
and they don't have the right of way and whatever to make Lake Elmo Avenue a quiet zone either, so.
Gotcha.
So with the 12 million for the treatment plant, that's just a first chunk of it, like, it's 45 million, correct?
I think we've got 50 in the CIP.
All right,
50 in
And
the CIP.
obviously, that's
It's grant
planned
funded.
for grant funding,
Yeah.
yep.
That's why I was curious, I'm like, why is it only 12? Is
Yeah.
that just the initial design and some construction?
Correct.
It's broken into a kind of a year by year like we do with other big projects that
Alright.
are gonna span multiple years.
There's several, the one thing that kind of strikes me is, Ridge Park parking lot. Seems like a large expenditure for a park that gets minimal use, and I think it's gravel right now. Where did this come from? I'm assuming this came from the Parks Commission.
That's my understanding, is that anything in the Parks CIP does get reviewed by the Parks Commission.
I think that's from their discussion. We had that one proposal where they were looking at updating Ridge Park.
With a like a ball field
Yeah,
at the
they had, like,
time,
the football
right?
field in the picture.
Okay, those are the questions I had regarding
Can I
most
just
of that stuff.
kind of step back in here? So I guess, one, I would just give the example of, think about your personal finances. You don't go out and say, hey, over the next year, I want to do all these projects, and then go to your employer and say, hey, all these projects I want to do cost me $200,000. That's what I want you to pay me. And I feel like that's the approach that we're taking on this. We have to work this the other way. I think, and this is where I guess I want the discussion more from the council of, do you feel comfortable with how much our CIP is increasing? Do you feel comfortable with how much is being spent? Or do you think we as a council need to make some sort of guardrails so that it's not just a this year impact that we're making with our decision, where we can look at this more long-term and we're able to curb that increase of spending and again, I'm not saying that we can't have years if there is an emergency situation, or we do need the fire truck, because if we wait 4 years, it's gonna be double the price. I'm not saying that can't be done, but I think, again, we need to have those guardrails, so if we're gonna exceed the guardrails, it's a higher bar, and there has to be more explanation, there has to be more reason to go above that. So I guess that's where I'd like to have more discussion is with the council, is are you comfortable with just the bottom line number of how much the city wants to spend on these? And if so, I guess helping me understand why that process of figure out the expenses first and then go ask your employer for more money as a result of it.
Well, I don't think it's one way or the other. I think it's a combination of both. I mean, why I asked some of these is because I didn't really understand. I think it's incumbent upon staff, if something was not in the CIP or is not in the fleet program, or it's new, there needs to be some explanation as to why that's in this year's CIP. So, yes, to keep budgets down, but as Councilmember Dragisich said, sometimes you spring a leak, you gotta fix the leak, whether, like our water main issue, right? Otherwise, it's gonna end up costing you more in the long run. So to those, yeah, it makes sense. Years ago, we had an asphalt, asphalt pitch for pothole patching, and it was asked for council to replace that, and they denied it, saying that, hopefully they could get by with $5,000 of maintenance to fix it. Well, the next year it crapped out, and they ended up spending more than that on renting one.
And I want to be
Right.
clear, I am complete agreement.
Yeah.
We want to have foresight, we want to be preventative where possible, because
Yeah.
we want to have those. What I'm trying to add in is that guardrail. I don't want that to just be, it gets put in front of us without a guardrail. I think we should have some sort of policy, so it's encouraging the city to grow responsibly with how much we're increasing our tax revenue. And that absolutely does not mean we can't go over it. It's just, if we are gonna go over it, there has to be that explanation, right? We have that goal, and it doesn't even have to be, it's not like it's a requirement, but there's a goal of we're aiming for no more than this % increase each year.
In our long-term financial, Clarissa, didn't we go through that last year on what the percentages would be year by year?
I think we can talk about increases, but if you would like, I can continue on to the strategic financial planning. That'll talk a little bit more about some of
let's
that,
do
like
that.
long-term
Can I
revenue.
just get, and from council, are we comfortable with this amount?
My take would be, when it comes to capital improvements, because our infrastructure, whether it's parks, whether it's the street aspects, whether it's our equipment, because it's been purchased and installed in varying years, our costs are not gonna be in any linear fashion. And I think our policy is, if we are comfortable or not comfortable with the truck replacement, our vehicle replacement plan, and we had that discussion earlier. I see our job, if we don't like that, we dictate to staff, hey, we want everything to be pulled out by this much more to extend the lifespan above and beyond what best practice is, because we want to do that. If our policy is, wow, Mike's coming in good. If our policy is that for street improvements that we want to change our thresholds for when we act on a street, then we say that. Do I have concerns about cost? Yes, as I always do. I'm still not convinced with, say, Ridge Park. I'm not convinced with those improvements. But it's been identified as something to have in here, but we certainly haven't approved it. So I'll be curious when that comes to be. I'm still very apprehensive about, say, what was the other one? We had the conversation about streetlights. Lake Elmo and 36, we've had the conversation on. I guess that would be my take. I fully concur that we are the ones who are then responsible for telling our constituents, here are the costs for the services that you're demanding. But one point I do want to make, thank you for putting that stuff on the website. Like, I was going through it earlier. So it's the same information we have in our packet, but now it's in an interactive form that people can use, which is far more accessible than, say, going to our meeting agenda, going through a packet. So thank you for that. But obviously, to your point, Councilmember Hearn, the more information we can get in there, the better, such as, the additional item that was needed from Public Works. Well, why? Here's the reason. It was found out that this was the problem, this was cracked, this is old. That's the level of information that I would want to know, and I assume residents would want to know too. To the point of Ridge Park, that's gonna be a conversation. But I budget for things in knowing myself, if we want to talk about personal finances, I budget specifically knowing things are gonna last a certain amount of lifetime. I put money away for it to plan for it, and also knowing that I can't control for certain costs. I can't predict that something's gonna go out, but I sure as heck can predict that washers and dryers or fridges are gonna last a certain amount of time. So I agree with the mayor. There's some things we can predict, some things we can't. I would rather be more prepared, but we haven't approved anything on here. We haven't. And I guess that would be, I don't know if that answers your question.
Well,
I think if you look at the expenditures for 27, 28, roughly $22 million, and streets and water are 19 million of them. If you're gonna focus on, are there areas to reduce, those are probably, we can't do much about the water, we need the water plant, and that's gonna be grant money anyway. But, streets are our biggest one, and so the question, if you're gonna look, is there room there? You got Public Works vehicles, $865,000 out of 22 million. I guess, not that, a $50,000 truck isn't a piece of money we should look at, don't get me wrong, but I think, if we're going to make some reductions that are be meaningful in the CIP, not that we should or we shouldn't, but we need to focus on where the dollar's going.
Yeah, I'm happy focusing anywhere, and again, my focus is, I think the number needs to come down, and I think staff needs to figure out how to make that happen. And if they come back and they say, well, we honestly cannot do this unless you change your pavement policy. Okay, well then maybe we have to relook at that policy, or they say, hey, we absolutely cannot do this unless we look at our vehicle replacement policy. Then I think we have to look at that policy. But I think we've only moved in this direction, and I understand it's gonna keep going in that direction, inflation, growing, but we've gone too far in that direction. Last year, again, with the increase that we had, looking to go at a higher increase even this year than from last year, we need to get it under control.
So from what you're saying, because I'm hearing from both sides that it goes up and down, but all you've seen from your perspective is just up,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Spending in government never goes down.
Yeah. Have we had any down years in spending? I mean, if it's only going up, then I completely agree with Councilman Hearn that, you know, it should only go up 1 or 2% so we can kind of quell that spending a little bit.
I will say that the years past, the city limiting 2 to 3% has put us in an unfortunate financial situation behind the 8 ball.
Got it, okay.
That's my,
And so that's what I'm saying.
that's my opinion. Because I don't think that our assets were being maintained to the level that they should be maintained. Our staff wasn't at the level that it should be for representing the residents for their needs of, whether it's permits or just general public works stuff or snow plows or any of that stuff. That's just my opinion, and I think putting in a blanket 3% is being a little,
Too rigid.
well, I don't think it's taking in the reality of what's happening.
Sure.
So as an example, if you go 28 to 29, the projection in our wonderful website that has filters, again, this is awesome, is 65 million. The next year in 29/30, it's 42 million. Now, obviously, a massive driver of that is water projects. But that, I guess that's the example, like it's gonna ebb and flow. The next year after that, we go from 42 to 23,
But then projects get added
I
between
was
now
gonna
and
say,
then
is that
to
just
make
because
that
it's not
number go
added
up.
yet?
but not 30 million worth. Like, it might be a park pavilion, it might be a different truck, but it's not varying by 30, we're not adding 30, well, again,
Well,
unless
and
we're
it-
talking
but
sports
the example
complex.
you're giving was specifically with the water treatment plant, correct?
Correct, that is
So
our
you're-
single
I mean,
biggest.
That's probably an outlier where you take that out because that's coming from
That's
the
grant
grant
funded.
money. And so
Correct.
that's an outlier, just like, you know, when we're getting this presented to us, we take it out.
And even
That's-
if you take that out right now for our 2027 to 28, our 57 million, you take out 12 million, that brings it down to 46, 45, which is still more than years 29, 2030, and 2031. So I guess, would it help to see like a line chart year by year for how, because I think that would help too, right? Because to Director's point, CIP costs do ebb and flow. I'll be honest, I don't agree with saying that this should be changed at this amount because the costs don't act like that. The costs don't obey that rule. When we purchase stuff, when the road goes to crap, when a truck fails, when we need a new plant, that doesn't obey us wanting to act like that. So I'm fine with that for operating costs and having that expectation. I don't support that for capital improvements.
I think we go back to, again, looking at the expenditure and say, you know, what's the need for it? Let's say a park pavilion, that came up, and, you
Yep.
know, well, park pavilion is a nice thing to have, but if we decide we don't want to spend quite that much money, might be something we say, well, let's delay this. It's an amenity, it's not you know, we don't need it to operate the city on, it's a nice thing to have. So I think you look at the line items in that regard and say if they're amenities that add to quality of life, we maybe, if we want to restrain expenditures, we have to look at those more non-essential things and say, can we reduce those or delay them a year or two to make it a little less impact?
I think the pavilions are the prime example. They are very nice to have, but other than a couple emails here and there saying the sun really sucks right now, I am perfectly fine saying that is a cost that we don't need to have. I am perfectly fine with that.
And that's as you go down the line, you look at each cost and say, do we really need this? You know, do we need it now? And you can make a decision that would make sense, or we can have a discussion about
I
those.
think that's half of it. It's do we need it, and can we do it now? Again, just like if you think about your personal finances, it's not just do I need it? Do I need it, and do I have enough to pay for this?
Yeah.
And we don't just get to snap our finger and all of a sudden our salary increases. And I feel like, again, so I understand the reality of the ebb and flow. I think the reality that we are missing though is that we are spending more and more each year, and we need to figure out ways to get it in control. And so I'm not saying that there won't be years where we have that ebb, where it does need to be more spending. And that's fine, right? We can have that increase, but it shouldn't just be accepted that we can have a 10%, a 15% increase each year. We should have a goal, and it doesn't have to be 2 or 3%, right? It could be CPI plus 2 or 3% that we're aiming for. And if we go above that, then it requires more explanation.
And I think we're on a little treadmill here, so I think we're delving into some things that I expect Clarissa to get into on the strategic financial portion of it that gives us some insight as to moving forward. Right now, we're just looking at CIP. We're asking for questions and feedback. I'd like to move on to the next portion because we're just repeating each other's statements.
No, that's fair.
Well, before you move on, I'd just like to make one other comment to Councilor Hearn. A week ago, you snapped your finger and your salary did go up.
All right.
I had to snap my finger with 4 other people.
Strategic financial planning.
Nick?
Real quick, just to get out of my head, because I'm gonna lose my notes here. Department heads, I think everybody's familiar with Planet, and I'm hearing from council that maybe we need to add just a little bit more to our justifications in certain things. So like make sure it's clear that it's a replacement or a new item, like you've got a few whatevers. Maybe just add something in that justification section about why it is that we need that, so. Okay, so moving on, our strategic financial planning. So what is it? We're calling it a plan, but it really is more of a guide or an informant. I was envisioning informants and Sherpas and like, what is this thing really? But, so we're essentially setting goals and trying to implement strategies to just put our financial trajectories on the right path. So when Councilmember Hearn talks about a 3% increase, I would love to see revenues be able to increase at a 3% or whatever it is, somewhere along inflation. We are decades away from that because, as to the mayor's point, we are significantly behind the 8 ball. We are looking for opportunities and problems well in advance. So we're going to map this out for 25 years so that we can see where our projected jumps are going to lie. We know that there's been a ton of development in the last 15 years. We know that we just added a whole bunch of water assets that are going to need to be replaced in 50 to 70 years. We just want to know what it is that we are facing. I'm not thinking about myself. I am thinking about the person 3 or 4 generations in my role down the line, as well as our current residents. And then we just want to provide some financial insight into some of the big decisions moving forward. Obviously, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of balls up in the air that we just don't know yet where those are going to land. And so we just want to be able to see, you know, again, how does our financial outlook change when we make those decisions. So I'd shown this during my first presentation. I like to think of the city finances as a big puzzle, and we're just trying to figure out how those all fit together to make the city of Lake Elmo. So our high-level priorities and objectives, and there are sub-priorities and objectives, and each of these in your packet, so I'd encourage you to review those. So debt management and long-term fiscal health, levy strategy and revenue stability. So to Councilmember Hearn's point, that's what we're trying to get to, is that revenue stability. Capital planning and infrastructure investment, budget sustainability and service levels speaks a little bit more to the operations side of this. And then updates and strategic alignment, how do we keep this plan informing our decisions and vice versa. So strategic financial planning, this is kind of what I was trying to explain. We are managing money in, money out, cash and debt. So we've got our blue line. We're trying to get our debt balances to decrease over time. These are not real numbers, by the way. This is for illustration purposes only. Green line is our cash. We want that to slowly increase over time because again, this is 2050. We want to make sure that the people, that the city 30 years from now has the money that they need to do the project that they need to do. And then our money in and money out, so our expenses and our revenues are gonna kind of vary over time. Sometimes our expenses will be higher than our revenues, sometimes our revenues will be higher. And I would expect those both to increase over time as a projection. Okay, so for the CIP discussion, that was really this money out within the framework of here. So what is the money in? For CIP items, it's our capital levies, our utility fees from the water, sewer, and stormwater fund. We get some state aid. We now have franchise fees that are split 50-50 between the infrastructure reserve and the park reserve, and then potentially some transfers from other funds. We are managing our cash balances and as well as our liabilities. So as far as goals go, so our bonding, our debt issuance, we're just over 50 million at the end of last year. I've done this on an annual basis. I'll talk to you more actually in my update and then again next month about a transition in the debt. So that's every 2 years, but for projection purposes, this will work. So our goal is to decrease our debt over time. Obviously, again, we're looking at trajectory, but also I want us to really think about this, the long term here. So my goal is to get us debt free by 2050, if not sooner, because I know that 20, 30, 40 years from now, the city is going to have a huge amount of infrastructure work that needs to be done. And so we're trying to build up those cash balances, but I know that they're going to have to take out debt. So I don't want us to have $20 million in debt and then have them have to take out 80, right? So we were at roughly $60 million in debt, load a couple, when I came on board 3 years ago, I think. And it's going to take time to get out of that hole. This is a chart. I want to explain how we got to the point that we are. Again, we're behind the 8 ball because we haven't had capital levies. So we just started doing capital levies a few years ago. We did have some transfers out of various funds for capital purposes. It was coming out of the general fund. We had money come out of the water fund for this building, so we were pulling it from other areas. But there has not been a strategic outlook for capital planning that I've been able to find. Maybe there was stuff on the books and it just wasn't carried forward. Councilmember, you're all nodding your heads. But there has not ever been a separate capital levy until we started here a couple years ago. So this is the reason that we are paying debt and trying to save for cash injection into capital projects at the same time. So we're trying to avoid this situation for future us. So the capital levies, our goals are to slowly increase to a point that fully funds the cash portion of capital projects. Find that leveling off point. It is going to be a moving target. We're a growing community. We just started doing a 10-year CIP a couple years ago as well. We only had a 5-year CIP. The CIP was not very well built out. We did not know what we needed. Okay, so the more planning we do, the more we're going to know about, the more stuff that gets put on the CIP. And then we want to make sure that we're maintaining revenue sufficiency beyond the timeline of the projections. So here's again, rough projection of our capital levies. Again, I would point you to your packet. There's a 5-page document that is the overview of draft projections and modeling that just kind of explains where I kind of came up with the numbers, sometimes it's I can explain sort of what that looks like, but I'm going to use a vehicle fund as an example. It's been around the longest, so starting whenever it is that we upgraded plan it, and we've been able to do this, I can run a report that's kind of shows what the balance of the fund is gonna be at the end of each year. And I was adjusting and kind of trying to slowly increase our vehicle levy up to the point where that fund was fully funded for that 10 years. And so I had started, I think, at 400 or 350 a couple years ago, and before there was the change in the latter one, it was gonna level off around 750. We got the input for the latter one as being a lower cost, so I was able to lower that to, I think, 600, something like that. So that's how that works. So these are what the capital levies are gonna, in theory, when I say this is what I've drafted. This is again, projected tax levy by type. So general fund is really rough at this point because we're not done with the budget and haven't had those discussions, and there's some kind of big decisions or big things that we need to talk about that'll come next month. So the debt levy is based on existing debt and new debt. So again, kind of trying to decrease that over time. And then the capital levy is trying to increase those over time so that we can both decrease the debt as well as increase our cash balances. So kind of the question of the evening that will help inform our discussion next month. We will start talking about that, when we're talking about the operations, we will also be talking about what we will be proposing for the tax levy. So these are the current, so 2026 capital levies, and these are what I had plugged in for 2027. I'm going to note, so we've been trying to segregate these funds for ease of budgeting. So making sure that when we have a fund set aside, we know exactly what that money was levied for, and we can budget that fund to the purposes within the CIP. So we added a general fund projects and miscellaneous because we have really expensive software. We took their software funds out of the general fund and the utility funds. So I'd like to shift into saving some money for that, and then whatever else we come up with from admin on the admin side. So just kind of penciling a small fund for that. Public Works, buildings and facilities, same thing. We're trying to shift those expenditures away from the general fund and into a capital fund. City Center CIP, we just built this beautiful building, and what did we calculate the depreciation of this building is something like $250,000 a year. So we would assume that when this building eventually gets replaced, it would be a mix of cash and bonding. And we also have replacements of various systems, refrigerators. There's a lot of refrigerators in this building that we need to save for. The Park Reserve, there's a levy penciled in for that. We skipped it this year for 26. If you look at the parks page, there is a park dedication fund that is funded by development. That fund, based on development, is looking like it probably will go negative. However, we're relatively conservative with our development projections. We've got some big projects coming down the road, so these are future decisions that can be made. The Fire and Equipment and Project Fund had started out as somewhere to put the state money, but now we're using it as it's going to be a really good tool for setting aside things that are not vehicles. So a lot of those fire vehicles all of the fire vehicles get funded from the vehicle fund, but the turnout gear and tires and whatever else, kind of these sort of in-between projects. The street maintenance fund is specifically for the mill and overlays and seal coating projects. Infrastructure reserve is our main fund for street improvements. Vehicle and equipment, obviously vehicle and equipment. The street lights, again, kind of planning for this long term. So the next couple years has a couple small projects. Our biggest investments take place, I don't remember exactly. It's probably, we've got maybe 10 more years before we really start. But then it's like $3 million within the span of 10 years that we need to come up with. crosswalk improvements, I penciled in a separate one because I didn't have a good plan for that one. And we don't really know what that program is gonna look like, but because there's a $140,000 proposed project, I needed to come up with some funding. And then the ballpark, is for the property, I'm calling it ballpark, we just called it something, so the, 77, 78? 76, so many acres that was purchased last year. This levy is to pay for the interfund loan that we created to purchase that. So that's kind of a given. So that's that. And that's our next checkpoint. Questions, feedback on strategic financial planning. Anything more I can go into as far as the ups and downs and?
So like as an example, if you go back a slide, in the case of, and thank you, that was amazing, for the infrastructure reserve from going from 400 to 522, correct me if I'm wrong, we are intentionally increasing that for that transition to try to do more cash for those projects instead of debt. That is occurring because of our debt strategy.
Correct,
All right.
correct. It's also occurring because we know, based on the amount of streets that we have $100 million in street assets, and if you want to even very loosely say a street lasts 50 years, that's $2 million a year on average, right? And we're at 500, or what am I at? 522,000 for a levy. So if we need to slowly get to at least $2 million a year, I think it's actually higher than that, then we need to start now, and we need to be actually
But is
relatively
that our
aggressive.
goal, to pay for projects fully in cash?
Not fully, because I
Isn't
think
that
that
the
there's
example
some
you just gave?
strategy. I think there's an opportunity to do that. I think that's the best way to do that. There is, however, also the fact that you want to have a mixed strategy, right? You don't want to levy so much that you're affecting your financial viability and whatnot. And also, you never know what interest rates are going to do. So you want to be kind of flexible, and you want to be able to, if we can get if we're better off taking out a little bit of debt and retaining the cash and because we've got better return or whatever. So you want to have a balanced.
But, so the
approach.
example that you just gave there, right, where you said it would be $2 million of, did I hear you right, $2 million of depreciation per year in our roads?
On average.
On average. So if
Very,
you're
very,
saying-
very rough numbers.
Well, okay, so on average, if you're saying that we need to get that fund up to where it's to $2 million per year, I disagree with that policy. And that's coming from somebody who doesn't like debt, but in a city, that is an asset that's gonna be used by people for 20 to 30 years. And that is where I am
So-
okay with debt in this stance. And now, obviously, I want our debt numbers to come down, and you showed us this last year, that those numbers can come down even if we increase these numbers at a much more modest rate.
So I would say, when you're talking about infrastructure reserves, it's not just the roadway. So every time a development goes in, whether it's the one over here on Chilton's old property, or Limerick, or whatever, they all have water main, sewer main, right? Those do need to get replaced at times. So actually, the surface and the roadways are not really that costly, relatively speaking. But when you guys start digging up pipe and replacing that in, let's say the lifespan's 40 years, 30 to 50 years, that's where cities now are getting in trouble, not being able to do that. So like 2008 to 2015, when interest rates are down and your prime was at 1.5%, cities, counties, state was bonding as much as they could, because that's like darn near as close to free money as you can get for your infrastructure. With interest rates as they're going up now, you need to balance that a lot more, in my opinion.
Would the depreciation on those portions, the sewer, would the depreciation be a 1-to-1 from the roads? So if it's $2 million of depreciation on roads, it'd be $2 million of depreciation.
It could go up,
Could be higher than 2.
could be,
So it's
I'm just
half of
gonna-
the cost.
depending when how deep it is. the material that's being used.
So even if that was the case, right, so then we're saying we'd be paying
You're
for
still
the
gonna
project
end up,
50%
you're
of the
still
project
gonna
cash.
end up bonding something. Gonna have to.
So
Go
if
ahead.
I may, so the pipes are actually covered in the utility fund. The $100 million in assets is put on our books when it is built. So that depreciation, again, I was using that as an example, it's a very, very rough number. I would say that's the absolute minimum we need to do. When we put it on our books, if there was a development built in 2008, 2005, whenever, it was put on the books at $2 million, so as an example. When we actually replace that in 50 years, we've got 50 years of inflation to put on there. So our depreciation is in 2008 dollars, but our street reconstruction is in 2058 dollars. And so we, if theoretically you had put away that exact amount, you would have, when it was built, you would have, and just let it increase with interest, you'd theoretically have close to what you need here. We haven't done that at all. So we haven't put any money away. We're 15 years behind the 8 ball, if you will, and now we're trying to get to that dollar amount there.
I'm not arguing. I want to move in that direction. I want to move there slower.
Sure.
But that is my whole point.
I think one thing
And
we can
saw
do
the
is,
numbers that we can do it.
we don't need to get down to zero debt.
No.
We can come up with a number, maybe it's 20 million. And our goal is to balance it out so we never have, so we try and maintain a debt of about 20 million, it's X% of our value, And then we say, well, if our streets are 5 million a year, and we're gonna have a $20 million debt, maybe we only need that 3 million in levy. I'm just making numbers up off the top of my head. But we don't have to go to zero debt either. That's not necessarily realistic, because we'll find times when interest rates are low.
Yeah.
But the plan,
Right.
you're going in the right direction with the plan. As we evolve, we're going to make changes. But I was just, we don't need to get to zero debt, but 60 is an outrageous amount. 20 is more manageable for a city our size. As we grow, maybe it's 25. But we could massage these numbers.
Right.
But we're going in the right direction. And your point, Councilor Hearn, is that, when you build a new street, if you pay for it with cash today, the future users have no expense to it, And so having the assessment policy provides them with an expense for the new street and kind of offsets that balance. But again, I think if we aimed somewhere in the 20 to 25 million of outstanding debt and structured our levies and everything to get there over a period of time, I think we'll get there.
She did
And-
that exercise for us last year.
Right, and I think the other thing, that the mayor's pointed out earlier is, we have the unfortunate situation of inheriting a financial condition that for a while wasn't where it needs to be. The depreciation charges in our utility funds, we're not covering them. And, we're surviving on connection fees and sacks and whacks to make those debt service payments, but we have a plan to get there. And I think your plan to get there is well thought out, because we're not trying to break our citizens as we get there. We're trying to inch it up every year and reach the goal at some point. Economic conditions change, growth change, or whatever, we're gonna have to step back and say, okay, what do we do now? But based on the best knowledge we have, your plan gets us there, over a 10-year period, which is sustainable given given where we at, and our best guess.
Would it be unsustainable to do it over 15 years?
Well, I don't think it would be, but,
And then that's my point, is just we can do it over a different time period.
Well-
And again, she did this exact exercise for us
but,
last year.
but one thing we have going for us now is, and going forward, we have a lot of growth going on. And so that growth provides us with additional support to make these changes. So if we add, a lot of tax capacity, we can increase the levy without increasing taxes, and get to where we need to be financially without causing a great deal of pain.
But all we've seen as population increases is taxes increase. So I don't know if I agree with you on that.
Well,
It doesn't pan out with what we've seen.
because where we started from. But going forward, I think we have a better opportunity to do
And
that.
again, I agree, we have to step in this direction, But to the point of, do we need to do it over 10, or can we do it over 15 years?
We didn't have any capital levy, and now we've got some in. And so unfortunately, we had to make a step that was greater than our growth. But as we go forward, we can taper that down. And that's the council's role to work with the staff and say, well, we can live with a 3% levy increase, and it may not get us as quick as we're hoping. But if we get some big growth, maybe it's 6%, because we had a big growth, but our tax rate doesn't change. And so we have to balance out what's going on around us with our needs in a way that makes sense and doesn't, penalize our residents any worse than we have to. But, if we don't have the levy and we issue the debt, now we're paying the interest costs, and those are all levied as a tax. And so there's that balance between, is we better to just pay the principal part through a capital levy, or pay in principal and an interest cost through a debt levy. And so I think Clarissa's trying to make those balances and her best judgment, given all the different things happening around us.
I find it to be shocking. Depreciation for this building, the estimate's $250,000 a year. I mean, it's completely valid. It's shocking. So it's our job to be the communicators, right? That is a prime example of part of the job. This is why I appreciate having the staff that we do for identifying that piece. The streetlight thing is another piece. We had the discussion, obviously, that's why it's here now. There are places where they're not identifying that, and it's going to end up being a sunk cost down the road, and a place might not have the cash for it. So I appreciate having this. Do I enjoy paying taxes? God, no. But I appreciate having a plan. And I agree with both of you. What that plan looks like is going to ebb and flow, right?
Yes.
A future council 4 years from now might say, yeah, we agree with that council member Hearn. Gosh darn it, he was correct. We need to slow it down. And they might. And that's fine. More power to them. Or they might say, you know what? Councilmember Dragicich was completely correct for once. We're going to speed it up. And
I doubt that'll happen.
So that's the thing for staff, it's going to ebb and flow. You're going to have different council members in here who are going to ebb and flow on their priorities for their speed of this. I hope to God, though, that we'll always agree as a council from now for perpetuity on the importance of having a financial plan that's sustainable.
Yep.
That, to me, that is the foundation, and I think all five of us are agreed. We're solid on that. It's just, we're going to have our disagreements as to how best to get there, but we all agree that the fact that having a financial plan that is valid, that has been double-checked, where the numbers are correct. Some of you weren't here. There was times where the budgets were not correct, and there were gaps at the end of the year.
Ever correct? We're just.
We're talking like six figures mistakes at the end of the year. So that's where it matters having staff here that are here for the long term and that are competent and can communicate to us, because then it's our job to communicate to residents, unless they call you and complain. But, so it's in that regard, my point being, I am happy seeing these numbers. I'm not happy in knowing that these are the costs. When this building was built, that was never discussed. Here's the long-term things you need to start taking into account. Just like it was never discussed when sewer was put in, starting in the 2010s in downtown. By the way, here's the things you need to start planning for. So we are behind the 8 ball, but we're also not, because we are doing the things that are necessary at a speed that's going to ebb and flow.
About a year and a half ago, the Robbins School District had a oops in their budget, $20 million oops.
Yeah.
And we don't have those kind of things here. Thank you, Clarissa. But it's very difficult. Councilor Hearn, I think as we get down the road and start looking at the tax levy and the tax base growth and all that, we can take a look at what makes the most sense and make adjustments either upwards or downwards that don't cause great pain to our citizens. But we just don't know enough right now. Based on what we know, in a good world, this is where we'd like to be because it fits our long-range plan. But our tax base grows 20%, maybe we can do a little faster.
I keep losing my point. I was gonna make.
You're going to say brilliant points by everyone.
Oh, the 15 years. So 15 years is a really, really good point. We are in the prime sort of point in time to be making these changes because we have so much development. if we were another city and we were this far behind, we would be struggling desperately to try and figure out how to make this work. But because we have development, those extra revenues are allowing us to turn this ship.
Yeah.
This ship stops turning, stops developing in, what are we thinking? 20, 15 years, 20 years max?
Yeah.
And so if we don't get everything sort of in line and find that leveling off point in 15 years, it becomes significantly more difficult after that.
How high do you think our tax rate goes in the next 15 years?
It depends on development. Tax rate is simply the ratio of levy to tax capacity. So I project based on what the numbers that I'm given by development and levies that we are guessing at that would be, acceptable to council, but based on this round of projections, I think we were at, let me see if I had, no. I think maybe it's in the packet on one of the things, but I think it was maybe right around 50%.
So you think we have to get up to a 50% tax rate, which would absolutely put us at the top of the tax rate chart of all the cities around us?
Nope.
Where would it put us? Second?
More like third, but again, you're comparing
Around the podium.
2050 or 2045 tax rate to today's tax rate. So Stillwater is going to be in the same boat, but worse off in 2050 because they don't have the level of, I don't think they do.
No.
I cannot
the levy.
imagine a 50% tax
50%
rate.
tax rate is actually significantly lower than the cities that I've worked in. We were at close to 60% and looking at higher because they didn't have the cash saved for improvements, and they weren't able to develop. So, and again, the tax rate is just a ratio. So that tax rate is going to change dramatically if there's a market crash. Nothing we can do about that unless we tank our levies.
Now, 50% sounds very scary with people watching, like they don't understand the dollar amount with that. Could you break that down into like a more digestible number of like what that looks like?
Yeah.
Well,
You
our
think
tax
for
rate
that.
today is about 28%?
Just over, right around 30, I think.
Yeah, it's right in that range, and so if you said if your taxes were $1,000 today, and your house rate, increase at the inflation rate or whatever, and does it 2057 what you're talking about?
2050?
Yeah, your taxes would be, 60% higher, $1,600 instead of $1,000.
But it's on a house that's more expensive as well.
Yeah, based on a house that's more expensive as well, yeah. Assuming,
But it's a higher tax rate on a house that's valued at more.
yep,
So I,
And that's a
But
yearly
your dollar is
cost,
worth
correct?
more as well.
I've seen taxes in the last 5 years for residents double in the last 5 years for what they're paying over the year.
I've never seen
I
that on
can
my-
get you stubs to show it. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll bring it to you.
No, you don't need to, I believe you. I just
It's-
haven't had that experience.
I just think 50% sounds a lot scarier than
So-
1,000 to 1,600.
Yeah,
That's
so if I
where
could,
get-
I don't know if does anybody want to let us on how we get to the tax impact? or-
I don't want to be the only one in the room that wants a lesson. We could do that after the meeting too.
I mean, I can, so your house has a tax capacity that is based on Minnesota statute. So if your house is worth $300,000, your tax capacity is your $300,000 times 1%. So the tax capacity of your house is $3,000. We apply our tax rate to it's to the taxable value, but let's say we apply our tax rates, 30%, to your $3,000 tax capacity brings you to $900 in city taxes. I would also draw anyone's attention to the where do our taxes go spreadsheet that I had put together for the last couple of years. It tells you kind of roughly what you might pay for city services. So if 50% of our budget goes to public safety, so fire, police, building inspections, whatever, then that calculator takes your home value and calculates exactly what you pay for police. So you might see that you pay $471 for police, fire, and whatever. And it's just a nice, like, okay, is $471 for fire worth it? Yeah, whatever.
So we would be in 2050 at 50% of that 1%.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to clarify.
Yep.
The one point the finance director missed is the homestead exemption.
I did mention the taxable value and blah, 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 blah. So, I'm trying to simplify it.
There's a little bit of a clip for, if your house is worth less than 534,000 or something,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a reduction.
It's a different
Okay.
class rate.
Yeah,
Right.
so.
That's,
And-
that's the easy math version.
And then the Counselor, we talk about property tax, it's a total tax, and a lot of that tax increases for voted levies. You know, $100 million bond that the people voted for the new schools, and that gets, levied out on a market value basis, not a tax capacity, which costs homeowners a higher amount. The tax system is fairly complicated, but, if you went back and said, the city rate, it's a portion of your tax bill, as you know. It's just, the total tax was influenced by a lot of factors outside of the city's control. We get blamed for it, but a lot of factors outside.
Okay, so just to keep us on track, any other questions, feedback? Happy to take it again. This is sort of our first touch point in the levy discussion. We'll have additional discussions at the August workshop, so we can certainly let this concept percolate a little bit, and we can revisit it then. I just have one more topic to run by you while I have you here today.
I would just like to suggest, if you come with a plan, we could cut our levy in half and double our cash. We'd be very grateful.
I'm on it. We got some land for sale, right? Okay, so our final topic tonight is regarding the use of stormwater funds to fund streets. So we've talked about this a few times, and council had requested some additional analysis a couple months ago. So Nina ran some numbers, and so our there's a few different things going on here. There's the question of what can the stormwater fund handle now? What kind of increases would need to be applied? And also, there's the question of, like, what are the stormwater costs within a street project? So I started with that piece and used some past projects to estimate some percentages, and I applied some categories to our CIP moving forward, and I came up with a really, really, really rough number of $480,000 average for the next 10 years. That is only on the local street improvements, does not include any of our transportation projects. So we plugged that $480,000 into the utility model for stormwater, and Nina came up with let's see, I'm sorry, I'm not probably going in order of your. That's okay. She made the slides and I'm talking.
It's okay.
So 480,000 was what we penciled in. If we added transportation projects, it would be closer to 750.
Can you tell me the difference between a street and a transportation project?
Sure. Do you recall what the engineering spreadsheet looks like? So like it's at the top portion has like 2027 street improvements, 2028 street improvements, 2029 street improvements.
Yeah, the annual
And then
roads that we do.
The next segment is transportation projects, and that's like city collector roads and county
The shared ones.
co-pays. I keep
Yeah.
calling them
Cost shares.
cost shares, right.
The ones that cost more.
So like our collectors,
don't have
some
a
of them
choice.
are on the MSAS, Minnesota State Aid System, which we get a paltry sum from the state on gas tax dollars, gets distributed. And then, our cost share with the sauce.
Yeah.
All right.
So going back, we had updated the utility study this winter and came back with suggested increases of 8% per year in order to get to where we were covering depreciation. And so that was already sort of like, not on the books, but like incorporated into the plan. When we're covering depreciation, we're not increasing our cash out, right? It's just depreciation, just depreciation. So that increase alone increased the amount of cash available to transfer out of the fund. If we were to, maybe you should explain the 10% since I wasn't the one that.
That's okay. So, how we came up with that is increasing to 10%, doing a $480,000 transfer every single year, starting in 2027, allows us to get to a net positive in 2033, and originally with the 8%, it was 2031. So,
And that was without the 480?
it was without, yes.
Right. So if we add in the 480, we need to up it to 10%, and we're not achieving that solvency for another 2 years. Correct? Okay. Okay. So these are the rates. Is this the 10% or
It
the
is.
8%? So this is the 10%. So we're at 103 this year, and it would be 267 in 10 years. This obviously does not take into account any type of restructuring. This is like as it is
Straight line.
right now. This is just showing the cash flow, so we're dipping down, and then we do start to build the fund. But it's still, this looks like a big increase, but it's still only $4 million after 10 years, and we have, you know, roughly how many dollars in assets we have?
In Storm, 40 million at the moment.
So I like to keep track of that ratio between like cash and accumulated depreciation and total assets.
Is that just using the straight line method?
It is.
Okay.
I would also mention that again, we're really, just in the last few years, starting to build out the CIP. We have a new public works director we'll be building out. You know, we've got a lot of kind of the newer developments. We've got stormwater pond maintenance, these big projects that just have not hit the CIP yet. So we're expecting the number of projects in the CIP to need to increase significantly as well. So.
Am I correct in presuming earlier numbers hours ago about roads and some of the things, those costs do not include the hypothetical transfer of stormwater funds to help with those road projects?
Correct. So, and I, just for my own, because I have to model this, and anytime we change things within our systems, it gets really time consuming.
Gotcha.
So what I did was, for the modeling, you know, we looked a little bit more, we didn't truly look at the cash balances of the infrastructure fund just yet. So essentially, like, in my modeling, I would just build in a transfer over to the 409 fund. So we're just we'd be able to use more cash on that project. Or maybe the portion of the cash comes from the stormwater fund versus the, whatever. I'll have to think better about how to better explain that later on. Okay, so 10% net positive in 2033. There's lots of other discussions going on that we need to kind of settle down. And where's my options? Okay, so I proposed two options. The annual transfer, there's a couple ways we could do that. Right now, the fund can handle starting at $100,000 and growing to that roughly $500,000 over 5 years. We could theoretically increase that into more of an, increase that faster and have the fund either go negative or do an interfund loan from a, time-involved standpoint. This is just a little bit more straightforward. Option two is diving really deep into those project costs and getting it as close to actuals as we can. There's a lot of effort that goes into that, both from like determining what is in that and budgeting everything. So from the time that we start budgeting for that project until the time I'm done paying off a bond, those would be segregated. Kind of like you're doubling up on any time you have to enter a GL number or
I
whatever.
think anybody would be really hard pressed to know the costs of stormwater for projects out beyond a year. And given that we do have different stormwater uses throughout the city, being rural and urban in nature, obviously the rural roadways that we did say last year on that 53rd, and there's some curb and gutter, there's some stormwater, but not nearly to the extent of what you would do if you had something on, in my neighborhood, Fair Station or Easton Village Parkway. So I don't know that you can get that detailed further out.
Right, you'd essentially be, we'd have to have some sort of a strategy that sort of does what I did and puts it in a rough category so that we can budget for it and you know, try and project out the cash needs of the stormwater fund, et cetera, and then it would be like when they do the feasibility study, we'd have a little bit more of that, like what the actual stormwater costs are. So in my mind, I feel like we're accomplishing the same thing with a transfer as we are with trying to separate it out perfectly, but we're saving a lot of time because we can still book the asset to the stormwater fund and depreciate it within the stormwater fund. So I don't think that was done perfectly in the past. It was kind of a hit or miss, right?
Yes.
In various ways. So I think we can still like properly account for those assets and the costs there without actually, like, from a cash flow standpoint, forcing every transaction to be directly related to storm, if that makes sense.
I'm kind of confused because we don't have a problem doing with the water, don't have a problem doing with the sewer. So why is it such an issue with the stormwater? We have two things. First, the planning part. If you say we're gonna estimate for planning purposes, it's 200,000 a project.
Just be a rough number,
Just be a
right?
rough number. But when we actually get to the project, we know what the stormwater
You
costs
know
are.
it down to the, well,
No, don't.
Right.
So when, for budgeting purposes, we can use an average number. When we actually get to a project, though, the amount we transfer out of the stormwater fund to pay for the project should be what those stormwater costs actually are on that project. Rather than just making an annual transfer of $500,000, that just, the problem I have with it is the stormwater utility payers are different than the taxpayers. And we want to try and treat these two
well,
fairly.
everybody pays something for MS4 though, right?
Everybody pays something for it.
There are
Isn't
actually
that
very few, there are
MS4
very,
right?
very few people that don't pay taxes, that pay stormwater. The vast majority are the same people. They're charged different, so we've got a flat fee, going back to our equity discussion. So we have our flat fee for our stormwater, and our streets are essentially paid by taxes, so that's a property tax, tax impact, tax rate on your
And
property of your
assessments.
house, right? So it's charged differently. But I had the numbers. 20 properties, maybe, like it's a different structure, but by and large, most people that pay stormwater also pay taxes.
We have some large places like the schools, large
Excuse me,
impervious
like what?
areas. The schools, impervious
Oh,
areas, they don't
school,
pay
yeah,
property
yeah,
tax,
yeah.
but they would pay a very good stormwater tax.
Right.
We have, government buildings, we have exempt electricity. Granted, there are not a lot of them, but to the extent that we transfer it to the taxpayer, we charge them more than they should be charged. I just don't know this,
So-
I don't know why
But it
it's
feels
such
like-
a hard issue to take the stormwater costs when we know what they are in a construction project and take it from the stormwater fund. It's not rocket science, it's not
I
a
think
huge
part of
accounting.
what I see though is you gotta have the stormwater fund to a certain part. Certainly you could take the stormwater piece, just like, when we pay, when the county does their cost participation policy, right? A lot of our participation is based on amount of flow, number of pipe, linear feet of pipe, catch basins, that gets associated with the city or municipality within their cost policy, right? So you could, but you gotta have the money there to pay for it. So that's where I'm saying, I don't think you can get granular to say I need $300,000 this year and $250,000 next year, but if you have that fund there, I agree, you should be able to take, when you have the project engineered with your SEQ, statement of estimated quantities, you should be able to know, nut that number,
Yeah.
what it is. But you've gotta have the pot to take it from.
Well, and
Right.
let's just say we don't have the pot, right? Well, then you sell a bond, just like we do with the street. We sell a bond, we have a portion that's paid for the water utility, a portion paid by the sewer utility, and a portion paid by taxes. Well, we'd have a portion now paid by the stormwater utility. Well, because at that point, we know what, we have the engineer's estimate of what those costs would be. We're not guessing. The only difference I would think we'd want to talk about on the stormwaters, what portion of the curb and gutter should be charged to stormwater? You know, I don't think 100% should go there,
Probably not.
you know, but there's some portion that should go to it. Again, these are all costs we can identify, and we structure a bond, we're basing it based on the engineer's estimate. We're allocating to sanitary sewer and water off the engineer's estimate for that bond. Why wouldn't we allocate to the stormwater portion? I'm failing to see why this is so difficult.
I'm not saying it's difficult, I'm saying it's more time consuming. And we need the revenues to support it. And so if you guys are okay with increasing the fund, the stormwater rate by 10% per year for the next 10 years, and we can make it work on our end. And I can adjust our practices and try and find efficiencies wherever I can. I'm not saying it's not doable. I'm just saying I prefer efficient and path of least resistance where I can.
Why is it more work on your end than the water and sewer part?
You're doubling the amount of accounting that I have to do on any project. So now I'm tracking. Every time we get in an invoice, we're having to analyze where that gets paid out of. Normally, it would just go out of you've got a lump sum and it gets paid out of the project fund. Now, for every single invoice, we have to go in and look at the
You could
detail.
create groups,
And
How do you
break
do
it
for
down.
water and sewer now?
if you wanna get into that.
The engineering does it, breaks it out.
I mean, so we just treat it the same as the other enterprise fund.
So it seems there's two questions. Do we want funds from this fund to go to road projects? That's really the first question.
Right.
And if the answer is yes, we need to then say, what % increase are we willing to do? Because the money is not there to do that, is what I'm hearing.
But if you don't do it, you're raising your other levies to cover it.
No, I'm not, I'm
You're
just
just saying
saying,
what the
I'm just
questions
saying,
are.
if the answer is yes, we then have to say, for this fund is going up, in knowing that it will reduce the cost for the road costs that we're paying with our capital levies. So the net impact to all but 20 properties, we can, pennies on the dollar, but we're shifting the buckets. So the first question, do we want to shift it?
I would just add one perspective to that, is that there's a really big difference in a shift in someone's tax versus, so like your tax increases by 10%, whatever, but when their stormwater fee jumps by 10%, it's only $10. But you're gonna hear about it probably.
Oh, for sure.
Yep, correct. Because it's not going to say, by the way, this likely is going to reduce what you're paying towards a capital levy on your property tax. It's not going to say that.
Right, because it's not technically gonna reduce their tax. Their tax is gonna go up because we need to raise taxes. It's just gonna go up slightly less, right?
My perspective is charging the cost where the cost should go be charged to. I mean, if we're gonna kind of ignore that, let's just charge janitorial services in the building to the water utility, because it has a lot of money. What difference does it make? I mean, you know, accounting for costs where they're incurred is kind of a basic principle. If we're incurring costs for stormwater utility, it should be paid for from the stormwater utility fund, not from any
Actually,
other fund.
From an accounting standpoint, if we're booking the asset to the stormwater fund and depreciating it there, that is also that's the way you're covering it. That's the way you account for costs. Your expense is actually the depreciation, not the cash flow itself.
Right, but we have a capital expense. We should pay for from the fund that it's incurred from.
Sure.
I mean, that's just logical.
So with the curb, is there an objective way to know how to determine what the cost would be for curb and gutter? Like, is there a best practice to say, well, 50% should be from stormwater funds? Or are we literally throwing a dart at the board to say,
No,
It
there's,
depends on where your project's at.
So, I can weigh in on this a little bit. Every city, it's like having a policy, you know what I mean? The curb and gutter is part of the street structure.
Yeah.
Okay, we build it with curb and gutter on purpose because it makes the street last longer and perform better. But it also serves as, it's like a drainage shed, right? Brings the water to where you need to get it to go. I've seen 50%, I've seen 33%, you know, in various communities, but it's almost like you gotta have a policy number for it.
actually, I would have no problem at all without charging any of the curb and gutter to the stormwater. Leave it in the street expense. Keep it simple. Pipes, catch basins, you know,
Manhole.
manholes. I mean, we don't need to, you know, measure with a micrometer either, because you can have curb and gutter, and we're gonna have, because it serves other purposes generally.
Like I said,
And-
it's part of the street structure. I mean,
Yeah.
we
And-
have it in there first and foremost for that reason.
Yep, yep.
I'd be okay with that.
I think that would keep it extremely simple, and then when we're looking at the invoice, we don't have to guess what, you know, pull our calculator. We got a catch basin, we got a manhole, we got a sewer pipe. Straightforward and easy.
I think it's the right thing.
so then it comes down to the percent change. 8% is sustainable, 10% gets it quicker to a cash balance because we also have other projects coming that are not currently even accounted for.
Well, remember, we're assuming in that something we're paying cash for all of these assets. If we look back and say, which one of these projects are we gonna be financing with debt going forward? Can we slow that down because we're going to be issuing some debt? We won't have the capital need to pull immediately.
We weren't paying cash for everything, right? We had one large project that we had to bond for.
Lions Park in 28.
Correct. And so we're
What
essentially
in
just
28?
shifting.
Lions Park.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the smaller the better. Vastly smaller the better.
I mean, we do have debt planned for these, for the road projects, because we're talking about doing a bond every 2 years, and it's gonna be for street construction, which includes the stormwater. So while we're trying to build this fund up, we could cushion a little bit of that through the, you know, through including those stormwater costs and debt initially, and then, you know, paying them out of future funds.
I think the 8% is the right number. I actually really appreciate with this one where there is a percentage given of how we're trying to approach this. Again, I kind of wish we could have seen that for the others as well. But I think the 8% is appropriate. It's, again, it's gonna get us there a little bit slower than 10, but it's gonna get us there.
Yeah.
And I think that is my theme of the night.
Slow but sure.
I just wanna get there a little slower.
I get you a tortoise shirt.
Yes, yeah, please, give me a turtle shirt.
Tortoise.
Tortoise, okay, sure.
I'm cool with that.
Do 7.99 just for Councilmember Hurd.
8.01, just to stick them a little.
All right.
I'm voting against it
Is
now.
that all you have, Ms. Handler?
I believe so.
Yes, it is. Okay, great. That's all we have for this evening. I'm just gonna adjourn the workshop at this point. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions.